the ewes, and you want to try and separate them into two groups, and usually when you do this it's complete chaos. The ewes want to get back with the lambs want to get back with the ewes, they're bleating, and it goes on for days and days. And when one particular professional shepherdess who wanted to try out one remedy, and she chose this one remedy to see if it made a difference. And so when it came to the separation time, she had them running down the race, and she gave them a spray of the remedy Ignatia, and then they separated left to go into one field for the ewes, and right perhaps to go in for the other field for the lambs. And then they just went out there, the heads went down, they started grazing, none of that noise that you tended to get. When it came to rounding them up with the sheepdog, same thing. The sheepdog was there, just rounded up nicely, they behaved perfectly, none of this sort of chaotic sort of escaping thing, and they were loaded up into the vans and then off to where they needed to go to. So amazing result, she was very happy with that. Pigs, and a story of some pigs on a farm where they had a problem with pneumonia, and they like really rattly chest. You could sort of hear the sort of rattling of these piglets from quite a distance off when you came close to them. And one particular remedy called Antar, which is very good for that type of thing. And we gave it actually to the ewe, to the sow. And so the sow then suckled the piglets, and the piglets got a dose of the remedy, and within a week that all cleared up completely. Fantastic. Poultry, an example on a local farm, a biodynamic farm this was, and they did had a problem with egg production going down. And they thought, okay, there's a problem here, let's investigate it. So investigated it, they did a worm count within the feces, and they found that there was a high level of worm burden. And because they're biodynamic, they didn't want to use a conventional worming product, so they phoned up Ainsworth, and they got a remedy combination for treating worms. They gave it to all the poultry, and they found two things. Firstly, the egg production went back up again, so these poultry were producing the right number of eggs. And then secondly, they measured the fecal worm count a few weeks later and found that had gone back down again. So again, they were getting results. So cattle, we'll come to that in a minute. So story after story after story. And we decided to collect some of these stories. And Chris Lees, whose photo you saw earlier on, she decided to go around and interview 50 of our farmers who'd done the course, and then put together all the different interviews into this particular newspaper. Quite a lot of these around I've seen. People who came to the front seats, you almost certainly got one. People at the back seats maybe didn't. We have a few more, perhaps, Jackie? We might have a few more. If people would like one, they can either come to us and see if we've got any left, or they can go to our website and we'll have like a PDF download version of it. So this is stories of 50 farmers. So all good, loads of stories. Then on one occasion, this was a dairy event we went to, and we had one farmer come up to us and he said, I loved your course, absolutely fantastic. Do you know, before I did your course, my drug bill was up here. Year after doing your course, it came down to there. Year after that, went down to there, and next year I expect it to be down to there. Fantastic course, really loved it, great. And off he walked. And we felt duly chuffed about the course we'd done, but then realised we hadn't actually asked him for what the numbers were for this particular sort of result he'd got. So lots of stories, but so far no actual data. Then we got sent some results from one of our farmers, and they went something like this. So we have a before and after. So the before, the little bar chart thing on the green, this is one he put together himself. And he's been measuring the number of times he had to use antibiotics for these particular conditions. So you can see if I come over here. He was using perhaps, 10 lots of antibiotics for foot problems, and maybe mastitis was getting, 24 lots of antibiotics over a given period of a year. Then he starts using homeopathy on the farm, and he starts getting different results. So the mastitis drops dramatically, maybe 6 cases ended up needing antibiotics, and the feet problems, he got them all cleared up without any antibiotics at all, and so on. So I thought, this is interesting. The farmers out there that we're teaching are starting to get some good results, and we don't just get the anecdotes, we start to get some data that they can then put onto a graph, and that looks quite impressive. So we started to think what we could do, and we decided to start a project. And the project goes under this bigger title, which is that a homeopathic approach creates a healthier farm. Because as you've heard tonight, there's story after story after story of how the livestock seem to improve in their overall well-being. We get to lower incidence of disease when we start to use this homeopathic approach. We thought we'd do a pilot project, and we set off to Wales. Of course, in Wales we have lots and lots of farmers that have done our course, and so they were quite close together. And we created this whole pilot project because we wanted to get some specific results. So what we thought we'd do is narrow it down to one specific thing. And what we chose to do is to look at if we could find whether a homeopathic approach helped with the antibiotic reduction on the farm. Could we get some numbers that demonstrated this? As has been said earlier this evening, we've got a big problem with antibiotic resistance, and we're trying to conserve what level of antibiotics we've got. So there's 5 farms in Wales, and we had a variety of aims. Firstly, to support this good standard of homeopathy, because there's no point in doing a trial about homeopathy on the farm and seeing if it's useful if the standard is pretty poor. So we had to make sure farmers are doing well. So firstly, they'd done our course, and secondly, I'd do a little interview to see where they're at and what support they needed. And then we needed to find effective ways of looking at records, just to make sure we were observing things well. We needed to see within that record keeping, could we demonstrate this antibiotic reduction? Could we get the data together that demonstrated this? Also, it's very important to ensure a standard of good health and welfare. Because again, if we start using homeopathy and say how wonderful we are, we're not using antibiotics, using lots of homeopathic remedies, but the animals are getting sicker and sicker, then that would be a problem. And then lastly, we needed to make sure the farm was running really well as a business. Because again, if the farm ran out of business by using homeopathy, then it's not very useful. So we visited each farm, and we checked on those 7 key learning points that we mentioned. Okay, the key principles: observation, repeating, remedies, learning remedies, and problem solving. And then we wanted to continue to support these farmers to use the homeopathy better and better. So we set up this sort of bespoke coaching support service and asked them to dig up the data. And what did we find? This is the first farm. So what we noticed on this one is that they had their ups and downs with the amount of money they're spending. So to start off with, typical amount, about £3,000 or so maybe per year spent on antibiotics. And then they came on the whole course, and you started to notice that the level of antibiotic spend gradually went down and down and down over a period of a few years. Then this curious thing seems to happen where it starts to go up again. I had a chat with the farmer and said, oh yeah, I think that's when we got the 2 new stock people in. And had 2 new members of staff who didn't know much about homeopathy, and they were starting to rely more on the antibiotics. So that went on for a couple of years, and then those 2 other individuals were sent on the homeopathy whatever course. They trained themselves in homeopathy, and again, it starts going down again. Little blip just towards the end, and that turned out to be quite a severe scab problem that took them a while to get on top of, and they did end up resorting to some antibiotics because it was appropriate. That was the first farm. This is the next farm, and this is a different sort of way he's presented his data. It's just numbers of cases of use of antibiotics rather than the cost of antibiotics. And you see, the first number of years up to about 2009, it varied a bit. Some years he had quite a number of cases. Other years he didn't use it hardly at all, and it went up and down and up and down and up and down a bit. And then after 2009, he decided, look, I want to do something about this, and I've heard about this whole course. Let's go on the whole course and see what happens. That leg of it. He started reading some books first, and then started to use the homeopathy. So as he started to apply it himself, it went down and down and down. Then he went on our course. And then what he found is once he got the confidence built up from what he was doing, he managed to get confident enough to really drop the amount of antibiotics he needed. And there's only 2 cases of antibiotic use over the following 4 years. So it really is minimising the amount of antibiotics he needs. So that was all good. The next farm on, he's a great chap, he's a really good stockman, but he's one of these guys that keeps absolutely everything in his head. He doesn't like writing things down. But nonetheless, he reassured us that he really wasn't using antibiotics at all. He'd been organic for many, many years. He supplied to the American market on the NOP scheme, and he really didn't use antibiotics. And I kept on asking, well, can you get me some data and this, that, and the other? He said, but I don't use antibiotics. Well, until eventually the penny dropped, and I thought, well, actually, the graph is really simple, because actually he doesn't use antibiotics. So those are 3 farms. There were 5 farms in all, but this was a pilot project. We learned a few things, and we know that farms have other commitments. And so one pulled out because they had to get a new milking parlour built, so that's fair enough. And then the other one pulled out because they were expanding the farm. They're going from like 400 or 500 to sort of 600 or 700, and they just didn't have time to gather the information together for me. So that was three out of the 5. We had some data. And then we thought, well, now, where next? This is a pilot project, and what can you do after that? So we decided to go a bit bigger. Not 5, but now 100 farm project. And why the 100 farms? Well, this is a quote from a film, that once you counted 100, well, all the other hundreds are the same. So if we could demonstrate somehow or another that this is going to work for 100 farms, then we could then demonstrate that anyone could pick this sort of idea up. So this is an ongoing project. We just started it earlier this year, and aims are very, very similar, but we've tacked on a couple of extra things. Firstly, we've noticed that we feel it's very important to maintain this process of health and welfare. I mean, homeopathy is getting a bit of a bashing from different quarters, and one of the bashings is that it's one that doesn't maintain the welfare of animals, which we think is kind of silly because it's kind of the reverse. So we wanted to make sure that was done. And then secondly, we'd noticed that a lot of the conventional farmers and the conventional vets were achieving this reduction in antibiotic use quite nicely by improving the husbandry, which in homeopathic terms we call getting rid of what's called the maintaining cause. So we decided to create a new model for health. This isn't what it seems. This is our new puppy. He's actually got something in his mouth which isn't a cigarette, and the wisp of smoke is actually his tail in the background. So I put together this thing called the 3-phase model of health. We're quite used to what's called a 2-phase model. You've got like sick and you've got healthy, yeah? We're used to that, and you either treat them or you don't treat them because of depending on what's going on. Well, I put together what I call a 3-phase model, because when it's a 2-phase model, when you get to the disease state, you kind of have this conventional treatment or the alternative treatments. Now, do you use conventional or do you use homeopathy? And I think, well, it's not really like that, as we've alluded to. It's more like, there's a healthy phase, yeah, and then there's a going out of alignment phase, and then there's a seriously diseased phase, yeah. So you start what we call the green level, yeah, when animals are healthy and they don't need much treatment, you've got husbandry working well, and that's all good. And then they maybe get a little bit sick, and then they may get really sick, all right, when it might be then appropriate to call the vet in, okay? And if the vet treats them well, then they come back into alignment, out of the red sort of veterinary bit, through the ambery bit, and then back into the healthy bit again, yeah? So on the farm, we've started to encourage what we call the traffic light model there, yeah? So we always encourage all our farmers to think at least about the red phase first. If the animal is ill, should I phone up the vet and get some conventional treatment? Yes or no? I mean, as farmers, you're making these decisions all the time. So we always encourage people to think about the red first. Then as they pull away from the red, maybe leave a few red flags in place and say, okay, I don't need the vet yet, but if it gets worse, then maybe I do. And then pull back to the green, because disease always starts with the husbandry, doesn't it? No, if we get the husbandry right, we get less disease. So always review the husbandry to make sure that that's been done correctly. Then you can come back to the in-betweeny bit, all right, what we call the amber bit, because that's where the disease starts. It starts as it comes out of the green. So, for example, Tom's mentioned about grief a couple of times. It's amazing how much disease starts with grief. Animals, they're feeling sad and they're heartbroken. And so remedies like Ignatia or remedies like Natmure are great remedies for that, so they catch it before that disease develops to that point where it gets to the red, where maybe it does need the veterinary treatment. So we encourage them to use that model. And we use it as a system of management, a way to look at things, but also we're starting to get farmers to use it as a system of recording. So what we're looking at is how well these farmers can maintain their animals, ideally in the green, occasionally neat in amber, and hopefully minimally in the red. And we're going to be measuring this over the next number of years just to see how well we can support farmers minimising the amount of time they spend in the red by getting the green and the amber working well. So that's our 100 farm project, and you'll hear more about it as the years go by. So thank you very much.